Okay, I'm showing that we are recording, so I'll get my gavel out, make it official. And good afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and call this session of the City of Issaquah Hearing Examiner to order. For the record, today is September 19th, 2023 at 1 o'clock. We have one item on the agenda today. This is number VAR 22-0003 involving a request for approval of a variance to allow for the installation of what ultimately would be a 150-foot tall wireless communication facility tower on a 60-foot by 60-foot lease space on property at 4221 228th Avenue Southeast. My name is Andrew Reeves, and I serve as the city's hearing examiner currently. And today it will be my role to collect evidence in the form of exhibits and testimony to determine whether the proposal is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, zoning ordinances, critical areas ordinances, and then the specific requirements for approval of a facility of this type under the municipal code. To that end, I did receive several exhibits, about 400 pages or so, in advance of the hearing that I had an opportunity to review. While I won't go into great detail, this did include staff report prepared by staff, the application materials themselves, information of a technical nature related to the property, information related to radio frequency, height, project plans, etc. that was included. Various comments, comment letters that were received, and I am aware there's certainly interest from members of the public, and I note that folks will have an opportunity to testify, but for those that have submitted public comments, they are in the record, and I don't weigh in-person testimony versus written testimony any differently, and so for folks that have submitted those written comments, there is a preference not to then read them into the record. I'm the person that ultimately will be reviewing this, and those comments, again, if they were submitted in advance of the hearing as an exhibit, they are already in the record, and I have looked at them. So just wanted to make that clear. In addition to that, information on the determination of non-significance, or DNS, that was issued under our state's Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA, and then information on the notice that was provided in relation to the application, as well as today's hearing. So I believe the number we're up to, I think, is 21 in terms of exhibits, and I'm going to go ahead and admit those exhibits into the record. Should anyone have additional exhibits they would like admitted, let me know when it's your opportunity to testify, and I'll address admitting additional exhibits at that time. All testimony today will be under oath or affirmation. That's because we're my decision to be appealed. My decision itself, as well as the recording of today's hearing and the admitted exhibits, would serve as the foundation for any such appeal. I may and sometimes do ask questions of those that are testifying. I'm not trying to sort of trip anyone up, just trying to ensure I have a thorough understanding of the proposal so that after the record closes, I'm able to produce a decision that is hopefully clear and legally defensible. And then finally, the order that we typically follow, and I believe we're going to follow today, is first I'll hear from staff, planning staff, who will give sort of an overview of the process that led us to today's hearing, and specific aspects of the project that they want to focus on. After that, we'll turn to the applicant representative, who will, I assume at that point, sort of lead their team. There are, this is Attorney Kim Allen, and there are, I think, several members of the applicant team available as needed, but we'll turn to them after we hear from planning staff. And then those interested in testifying from the public will have that opportunity. Traditionally and typically, I'll go to members of the public that have signed up in the room first. I kind of do that because for those that have signed up online, they're able to walk away and use the facilities if needed, whatnot, whereas I know in the room it can be a little more challenging. So we'll try to go through the list of those that have signed up in the room first. While there isn't a specific time limit, we do try to limit testimony to approximately 3 minutes. And just to be clear, unlike, say, maybe might occur at a community meeting or a council meeting, this is not going to be sort of an opportunity to have questions and have a back and forth. But if you do have ultimately what would be a question, what I would suggest is sort of framing it as, my name is so-and-so, and I'm hoping that someone will be able to provide additional information about X, because I'm, have questions about it. And then I'll take notes, and we'll make sure that staff and the applicant team take notes. And after we've heard from all members of the public interested in testifying, then we'll come around and come back to the applicant team and staff to respond to any such questions. As I noted earlier, quite a few public comments were provided in writing, and I do have those in the record. If there are folks in the room that have prepared written statements that they were hoping to read, I can tell you my preference would be to make those an exhibit instead, and have you introduce yourself and let us know that you have a prepared statement you would like to have included as an exhibit, and then we can have that submitted into the record as opposed to having it read out loud. And that will hopefully expedite things and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to participate. For those that are participating remotely, I believe we do have the option for the raise hand feature when it comes to that portion where testimony will occur. So if you are interested in testifying, when we get to that point, you can use that feature, and I will make sure to look over and try to get those folks the ability to participate. I think those are the basics. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll get staff sworn in. I thank everyone for being here. So we'll go to Doug Yormick on behalf of city staff first, I believe. Is that correct, Doug?
That's correct.
Okay, so I'm going to swear you in. And do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in testimony you give here today?
I do.
Okay, if you could state and spell your name for the recording and explain who you are.
Douglas Yormick, DOUGLAS YORMICK. I'm the Associate Environmental Planner with the City of Issaquah.
Great, thank you for being here. And did my sort of breakdown of the exhibits track with what staff was hoping I'd look at in advance of the hearing?
That's correct. I do have a letter that came in through email yesterday that I will be sending your way as well for inclusion. I have it printed out that if you were here, I was going to give it to you, but I will.
Yeah, it's okay. I was hoping to attend in person, and unfortunately, new medication. I can't drive at the moment, so wasn't able to. But again, in person versus remote, no preference, and not weighed differently. I would say that any additional exhibit can be provided to our clerk, Candy Bear, and we'll ensure everything will get collected and sent to my office after the hearing today. But in terms of numbering, we can make sort of exhibit 22, we'll call it additional public comments. And then I don't believe the staff report has a number yet. Is that right?
No, the staff report does not have a number.
Okay, why don't we make that, we'll just say exhibit 23 can be the city staff report. And then if there are additional public comments, we'll put them within 22. But then if there's other, substantive documents that have been prepared or PowerPoint or whatnot, we can add those as additional exhibits. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay, then if you're ready to get started, go right ahead, please. Oh, okay, and so we do have a PowerPoint. Did you want this to be included as an exhibit, Mr. Yormick?
Yes.
Okay.
This will be included as an exhibit, and the applicants also have a PowerPoint.
Okay, so we'll make exhibit 24 can be the staff PowerPoint. And I can see it fine.
So good afternoon. The purpose of this hearing is to facilitate review and discussion for the proposed project by staff, hearing examiner, and to further solicit public comments relevant to the specific proposal. So context, it is located in North Issaquah. The subject site is 28.86 acres and is zoned community facilities with a land use designation of community facilities. The site is currently vacant, but is the future site of an elementary and high school for Issaquah School District. Recently, our land use code was updated. The effective date was June 1st. The applicants have submitted a complete building permit application in advance of the June 1st land use code update. So they are vested to our previous land use codes, chapters 18.04 and 1822 IMC. The proposal replaces an existing wireless carrier facility that's currently located on a decommissioned water tower. The water tower will be removed whether the school district redevelops the site or not. In response, the 3 existing carriers that are on the water tower need to be relocated, and they are seeking the addition of a 4th carrier on the new replaced tower on the same property. The replacement pole exceeds the maximum height for wireless carrier facility. The maximum height is 85 feet. Complicating matters is our code preference for co-location of facilities, a slightly lower elevation, and the current location and the height of the existing conifers that surround the lease area. Since the tower exceeds the maximum height, a variance is requested. Here is the site plan showing the location of the lease area on the property and its location in relation to the property line. This is 2 images. One is the existing water tower. The other is the proposed wireless facility. The water tower itself, the antenna range to a top height of about 106 feet. The current height of the water tower already exceeds the maximum height tower for a wireless pole. Because our comp plan and our code require co-location, the new pole must accommodate the other carriers. And then I mentioned before the existing tree height, topography, and the vertical separation requirement for each individual carrier necessitates a larger pole. During review, we had the applicant supply an RF justification demonstrating coverage would be equal to the existing coverage and the necessity for the increased height. The city reports have been peer reviewed. Both applicants' RF report and peer review are included as exhibits.
Sorry, did you say the city's reports? You mean the applicants' reports were peer reviewed?
Yes, the applicants' reports were peer reviewed by a third-party consultant, yeah. And those reports and the results of the peer review are included as exhibits.
Just wanted to make sure I didn't miss something. I didn't think the city itself had an RF report. So. Okay.
So this is a breakdown of the public notification process. So this is variances are level 4s. We had a community conference, which is in the 1804 for variances. The meeting was held November 16th in council chambers. Following the applicant submitting for a formal variance, notice of application was sent out, and we had a formal comment period from December 22nd, 2022 to January 5th, 2023. During that time, we received 1 public comment. During review, the applicants provided a SEPA checklist, and we conducted SEPA review and issued our determination of non-significance. We held a comment period May 2nd to May 16th, followed by a 14-day appeal period. We received many comments. Those are all included in the exhibits in the staff report, and no appeals were filed. And then we had multiple times we tried to schedule this. This date is incorrect. This was from the last one, but we issued a notice of hearing for this in accordance with 1804, and provided that notification on the notice board sign in the Seattle Times, and notice mailed out to residents within 500 feet of the project. Written comments were due by yesterday afternoon. As mentioned before, this is a level 4 review. We went through the public notice, and we are right now at the public hearing stage. Following this public hearing, the hearing examiner will make the decision. Staff has provided a recommendation. City review, planning and engineering were the primary reviewers for the variance. Other divisions reviewed the site development permits, the site work permit, and the building permits. And externally, we had an RF consultant review their RF reports. The codes for this project are the codes that are vested. Those are also included as exhibits, so you don't have to go and dig around for those. And those are chapters 1804 and 1822, the IMC. So 1822-090 provides table for siting criteria. There are 3 criteria for siting wireless facilities. There's encouraged, discouraged, and prohibited. If a wireless provider wants to site in a discouraged area, certain conditions must be met for approval. Siting in prohibited is not allowed. However, the community facility zone is listed as non-residential and is in the encouraged table. 1820.
Apologies, Mr. Rowe. Just on that point, to be clear, essentially, this is the type of facility or use that would be allowed outright in this case, but because of the height variance is being sought. Is that right? I mean, this is...
That is correct.
Just wanted to be sure I didn't misunderstand that. Okay, great.
I should mention that new towers are listed as discouraged, but as mentioned earlier, this is a replacement for existing wireless facility that is on the water tower. 1822-100 provides for the design requirements for new wireless facilities. While most of the requirements are being addressed under separate permit, both the height and co-location were evaluated with the variance. Both the comprehensive plan and IMC 1822 require co-location for wireless facilities on a new macro pole. Under this proposal, co-location requirement is being met. Because of the co-location requirements, the existing vegetation, topography, the tower will need to exceed the 85-foot height, and so a variance is requested. Staff had the applicant provide various reports, provide responses to the variance criteria, and we had that report peer reviewed by an outside consultant. Here is a list of the various times that the public has provided comments following the notice of application, following the SEPA determination of non-significance, and then following the notice of hearing. Notice of hearing is where we had the most engagement with the public, where we received dozens of comments following the notice of hearing. Also note that a form letter was distributed around the community, and that's what most of the public comments were. They followed the same general formats. Here's an example of the form letter that was provided. So in it, there are several statements that I could take the opportunity right now to provide responses for. So the first is about the variance submittal requirements were not met. So in the code says within 28 days of notice of application, The applicant shall install a 4x4 sign in accordance with IMC 1804-180. When staff was made aware of this, we contacted the applicant immediately, had the sign installed. That was the reason behind canceling the first hearing back in July, was that it wouldn't meet the requirements for 15 days in advance of the public hearing, having the date on that sign. So we had the applicants install the sign, provide the affidavit of sign installation, have the date, the revised date or rescheduled date for the hearing for August. And now the sign has remained up since that time. The new date for this hearing was also put on there in advance of the 15 days.
Okay.
And then the facility will meet all setback and safety codes. Structural evaluation, including seismic and wind loads, will be evaluated under current building codes during building permit review. The city does not have standards for materials used, and the FCC regulates radio frequencies. The applicant provided the RF study, which the city had peer reviewed. Those findings show that our radio frequency to be within FCC limits. And then the replacement tower takes advantage of the existing conifers that are nearby, and the applicant proposes to camouflage the tower to blend more naturally with the surroundings. This is not a requirement by the city. This was a design that was selected by the applicants. The city's wireless code in 1822 does not have specific design requirements except for color of the pole. (1804-490) provides review and decision-making authority for variance review. Staff has reviewed and prepared a staff report with exhibits for the hearing examiner to consider. Decision-making authority for variances rests with the hearing examiner. Appeals of variances are judicial and with King County Superior Courts. And then with that, as indicated in the staff report, staff recommends approval of the variance with conditions. And the three proposed conditions are as follows, as you can see on the screen. There's some issues with access easements. The applicant is made aware of this condition. They have changed their access location to a different portion, which will be reviewed in subsequent construction permits. Site work permit is required prior to any ground disturbing activity within the access utility easement and lease area, and an approved City of Issaquah building permit is required for the construction of the pole and associated macro wireless facility infrastructure.
Okay, did that then conclude your initial presentation, Mr. Yorman?
Yes, it does.
Okay, just a few questions to start for you. First off, my understanding from review of the materials, and as you just explained in the staff report, essentially the applicant applied for this project and then also has submitted a building permit, and that occurred in advance of the change in the code. But for those that are sort of following along, am I right that the new code, is a different section now? I think it's 18.512, but essentially because of when the materials were submitted and deemed complete, we're working under that former version of the code, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, just in case folks are curious, are there major differences between the two codes? Not that we need to go into detail. I'm just trying to understand process-wise.
With the wireless code and the section for variance, no. They've remained the same.
They're essentially the same. Okay, so because sometimes, it's good to clarify that to the extent that, it can be confusing, this vesting problem. And as we know in Issaquah, this has been an issue in the past, that has been tricky in certain situations. But essentially, in this case, we are using the former version of the code, which is included in the PDF that was prepared for the hearing today, so that folks that would be interested can download it and find it. I know it can be hard to find older versions of the code, but essentially, though, the criteria for approval are comparable, basically the same. Yes?
That's correct.
Okay, just wanted to check on that. So that was the first question. And then you noted that while there were several comments that followed review under the State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA, there were no SEPA appeals. So anything related to SEPA is beyond the scope of our hearing today, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then in terms of public comments, you did provide an example just now, but in sort of, and I know there's quite a few, but in your estimation, what seemed to be the sort of major issues that were raised, just in summary, and if you could?
There are issues with the radio frequency, which is outside of city's review. We don't have any control over radio frequency. The access to the lease area was brought up several times as well. That's probably another one that's near the top, and that's being worked on with the applicant in the other permits. There's just the height itself of the tower, far exceeding the 85 feet that our wireless code allows for. The general look of the the monofur, the camouflaged wireless tower, to name a few. There was some comment regarding that this should be not a hearing examiner decision, but should be with the city council, and I provided the code for variances being heard and decided by a hearing examiner and not city council.
Okay. And so I guess to piggyback on that, ultimately I'll produce an actual final decision, and then were that decision to be appealed, would that be appealed then to the Superior Court? It doesn't go through the council, is that right?
That's correct. It's a judicial appeal to King County Superior Court.
Okay, great. And then in terms of, as far as you're aware, you had said there was one additional public comment that you have there with you that I haven't seen yet today, but can you just give me a very basic notion of what that might entail so that I kind of know what it says? We'll get it into the record, but.
I can. It's somewhat lengthy, and I don't want to step on her toes, but she is in attendance, and I don't know if she's going to be speaking on this or not. But
it's from whom? We were gonna make this 22A, essentially, exhibit 22A, and if there's additionals that come in, we'll B, C, et cetera, but. And who was the comment from the letter, Mr. Yerman?
Roberta Brown.
Roberta, okay. And there already are several existing comments from Roberta Brown in the record that are included as well, but we will certainly make this exhibit 22A, and it will be also in the record for review. So, and as far as you're aware, currently that's the last, new comment, written comment that's been received, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then let's see, sorry. Okay, I think probably the best way forward would be, I know there are folks interested, so what I'm going to suggest is, why don't we move to the applicant's representative and hear from them, and then any sort of detailed questions, as it were, that I may have, I can sort of ask at the end once we've heard from everybody. Does that make sense, Mr. Yerman?
Yes.
And sorry, before we move to the applicant, there was no other member of planning staff you were intending on calling on at this point?
No, I was not.
Okay, great. So with that, then why don't we go to Attorney Kim Allen on behalf of our applicant here.
Good afternoon, Examiner Reeves. I'm going to ask Mr. Yormick to pull up my PowerPoint.
Okay. And so my plan had been to then make this Exhibit 25, the applicant's PowerPoint.
Yes, I'd like to move this into evidence.
Okay. And I don't swear Attorney Kim Allen in because she's not here sort of testifying, but am I correct in that, Kim Allen, or should I swear you in? I guess I'll let you decide.
I'm happy either way. Why don't you swear me in?
Okay, just wanted to check. So you're sort of maybe will be providing factual testimony on behalf of the applicant. So we will swear you in then. Do you swear or affirm to tell truth in testimony you give here today?
I do.
Okay, and if then you could state and spell your name for us.
My name is Kim Allen, A-L-L-E-N. I'm with the Wireless Policy Group on behalf of the applicants.
Great, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Verizon Wireless, the applicant who will build and own the tower, proposes to replace the existing wireless communications facility that currently serves up to 13,000 Issaquah residents in an area of about 2 square miles. The new location is on the Issaquah School District property, very close to the existing location, which is a water tower that is due to be decommissioned and demolished to facilitate the build of the school. The replacement wireless facility will house AT&T, Dish, T-Mobile, and Verizon. It should be noted that AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon are already tenants on the tower or on the water tower, and they have been there for 25 years. Next slide. This is just an overview of the location, indicating some of the vegetation surrounding the site. One thing I want to clarify about the site is in the staff presentation, they noted the project area was a number of acres. That's the project area for the school itself. Our project area is a 60 by 60 foot lease area surrounding the tower that will house the equipment within a fenced area. So I just wanted to make that clear. Next slide. These are some photographs of the existing facility. To the right, you can see the water tower. The antennas are on the body of the tower itself. Equipment is down below. And then the photograph on the left illustrates some of the vegetation that's naturally occurring in this area. Next slide, please. So the school district plans on redeveloping this property with a new campus and will require relocating the wireless facility. Their approved site development plan specifies this particular location for the replacement wireless facility. This is the only viable location for this facility on the larger school district site. The water tower facility has provided wireless voice and data for over 25 years, including E911 and first responder communications. A new wireless support structure is imperative to provide uninterrupted E911 voice and data services for the customers in this area. Next slide. This is also pivotal to public safety. Public safety, first responders are heavy users of wireless networks, certainly in between the emergency vehicle and the medical facilities as patients are transported. Lots of data going back and forth on including test results, photographs, videos, things of that nature. So community connectivity and safety is critically important, particularly given the subject property is going to be used as a school campus. So service interruptions and drop calls certainly will impact the safety of the community and the ability to connect to E911. And frankly, without the new proposed facility, the existing wireless providers, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon will not be able to maintain existing coverage, which will result in severe service disruption. Next slide. So the city's height limit for all wireless facilities is 85 feet. The lowest of the 4 carriers antenna arrays and all those above must clear the 110-foot tree line on this property. And each carrier's antennas also need to be separated from the carriers below and above to avoid interference. So The proposed 150-foot height total is the minimum necessary to accomplish this and still clear the trees while including a 10-foot tree branch topper to make the shape more natural. So the tower itself, the top of the antennas, the top of the tower steel is 140 feet, just to be clear, and that, but there will be an additional 10 feet of height so that we can try to avoid the Q-tip effect that you see with some monofers and monopines and have a more natural shape to the top of it to make it less visually intrusive. Next slide. So to be clear, this facility is replacing the existing water tank location where carriers have been operating for more than 25 years. And without this variance, they will experience this, the customers of all three carriers will experience a severe wireless service disruption. This location is the only one available to serve this need. As was noted in the staff presentation, this is in the community facilities district where this is an allowed use. This site is surrounded by residential zoning where towers are just not permitted. And also the replacement tower has to be pretty close to the existing tower to be able to replicate the place in each of the three providers' networks that location serves. So there's not a lot of room to move the site to other locations, which has left us with this one available site to do this replacement facility. So as staff indicated, there's no requirement in the city of Issaquah that these facilities be stealthed, but the applicant is proposing a very high quality model fir with branching and bark to match the adjacent trees. We've located it, and the location is set on its mature trees to add additional screening. The monofir design has come a long way from the very early Charlie Brown trees that folks have seen. This includes lots of branching as opposed to the sparse branching that you saw years and years ago. And again, the effort to make the branches and the bark look like the native trees around them. And then adding DISH as a fourth carrier would provide an additional choice for wireless service to the people who live in this area. And so that is the intent, and also facilitates the goal of co-location of multiple carriers on one facility. Next slide. As was indicated in the staff presentation, the applicant did commission all three carriers and DISH, all three existing carriers and DISH, provided a third-party independent consultant with their RF data about this site, their needs, the height that's required. That individual is on the phone with us today. His name is Rich Conroy from PureCon. And at this point, I'd like to turn this presentation over to Rich briefly to walk you through the need for the facility and the justification for the height as the minimum necessary to do the project.
Thank you. Hearing examiner Richard Conroy, would you need to swear me in?
Yeah. Yes, I would. Thank you. So do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in testimony you give here today?
Yes, I do.
And if you could state and spell your name for the record.
Yeah, my name is Richard Conroy, C-O-N-R-O-Y. I'm the president and owner.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm the president and owner of PureCon Solutions, and I personally prepared the RF engineering reports that were submitted as exhibits.
Sure. So just to be clear, I believe those were the ones you had submitted were exhibits 6 and 7, I believe. Does that sound accurate? They're dated November 2nd, 2022, and this is the RF analysis and the RF environmental evaluation.
Yes, that sounds correct. I'm not sure what the exhibit numbers were, but those are the correct report designations.
Oh, great. Well, with that, I'll let you go right ahead.
Okay, just by way of background, my professional experience, I have a bachelor's of science, electrical engineering from New Jersey Institute of Technology and 35 years experience in RF engineering. I have been accepted as an expert before numerous zoning and planning boards, as well as before federal courts in California, New Jersey, Georgia, Texas, and New York on wireless litigation matters. As I mentioned, I prepared the RF engineering reports. The primary report was the justification analysis comparing the water tank existing coverage to a replacement wireless communications facility. My analysis included two pieces of information. One is drive testing. That drive test was performed by myself. My company went out and collected existing drive data and drive data from the proposed location to determine the height, minimum height of the facility. And we also utilize coverage propagation maps based upon data provided by the wireless carriers, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Dish. Through that data, I was able to prepare a comprehensive report. The justification report was reviewed, as was my exposure report, reviewed by the city's consultant, 3DB Communications. Just in summary, 3DB Communications peer review agreed that 85 feet was an insufficient height. And they also agreed that 110 feet was a minimum antenna height to tip. Now, this exhibit that we're looking at currently displayed on the screen is designated as Exhibit A from my report. What this Exhibit A represents is the coverage from the existing water tank. The existing water tank is designated by a red dot near the center of the map. And then there's a coverage overlay on top of a street map. Also, the water features of Lake Sammamish are depicted on the map. And the coverage features displayed by the color green represent the existing in-building residential coverage from the water tank. And as noted, the ground elevation of the water tank is 526 feet above mean sea level. This is a low band coverage plot, and it demonstrates about 6.6 square miles of coverage and service to about 18,800 people. Now, my report detailed a lot of information, a lot of technical data and different frequency bands, but for the purpose of this presentation, I'm trying to simplify it and just explain and demonstrate what's known as the low band or 700 megahertz frequency spectrum. Other information in my report can be referenced if needed, but this will probably speed things along a little bit. So to provide comparable coverage, a replacement site, as was mentioned earlier, would need to be near the existing site, would need to have a similar height above average terrain. And what height above average terrain is basically the ground elevation plus the antenna height. We know that the proposed site is at a ground elevation of 509 feet, and that water tank existing ground elevation is 526 feet, so approximately 17 feet lower. And it was also mentioned that the tree height in the area is very substantial. They range between 95 feet to 128 feet tall. So if we could just flip to the next slide, please. The second exhibit represents the drive test that was performed by myself. So, what a drive test is, basically, we go out to the location, we locate a lift in the area near the proposed site. We attach a test transmitter to the lift with an antenna. We raise the lift to the different heights that we'd like to test. Sorry about that. And then we drive around the area with drive test vehicles equipped with a GPS antenna, a scanning receiver, and we collect the signal. And then we're able to depict what the signals would be in the area through the various colors demonstrated on the drive test maps. The exhibit on the left represents the 85-foot height test, which is basically the maximum height permitted by the code. The objective of this test was to determine, would that height be acceptable for a carrier? And if it was acceptable, then we would further test at lower heights. The exhibit to the right represents a higher elevation. We're going to just stick with the exhibit on the left. What the exhibit on the left basically demonstrates is there's an inability to provide coverage at the low band frequencies, which provide a greater range of coverage along Southeast 43rd Way, and there's no connectivity along East Sammamish Parkway, Southeast. So basically what we determined is even with one carrier, due to the antenna height, due to the ground elevation, due to the existing tree heights in the area, 85 feet would not be able to meet equivalent coverage as the existing water tank is currently providing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we did also provide different frequency coverage, low band and mid band. The coverage loss would be substantially greater at the mid band frequencies, which are not demonstrated here. So based upon the fact that the 85-foot height was not sufficient, we moved ahead and tested at 110 feet, again at the low band frequency. The Exhibit E on the right represents the 100-foot test, which we determined to be the minimum height. This determination was based upon, number one, the 85-foot drive test height was insufficient. The median tree height in the area was between 105 and 110 feet, and the elevation differences between the existing water tank and the proposed site, 17-foot ground elevation difference. The average antenna height on the existing water tank is about 94 feet. If you were just to add that 94 feet to the 17-foot elevation difference, you would get a 111-foot tower height to provide equivalent coverage. So drive testing at 110 feet did demonstrate that. Again, the mid-band coverage plots that we provided in the report also demonstrate that we had equivalent mid-band coverage that compared to the water tank. What Exhibit E essentially represents is the 110-foot height now covers Southeast 43rd Way, provides connectivity along East Lake Sammamish Parkway. It covers approximately 6.3 square miles and approximately 18,000 people, which is comparable to the existing site. And again, not shown in this exhibit, but the mid-band map at 110 feet also provided equivalent coverage and service as compared to the existing water tank. Okay, you can go to the next slide. This slide represents the proposed coverage for the lowest carrier. And this is labeled, a little hard to see on the PowerPoint, but I believe it's labeled Exhibit G. And essentially what this is the propagation analysis from 106-foot antenna center line, that's where the energy propagates from the antennas, or 110 feet to the tip of the antenna, which is what we're representing as the minimum height for the lowest carrier. The coverage map, again, is represented by the color green overlaid onto the street map, and it demonstrates the low band coverage from the proposed tower at 110 feet to the top of the antenna is approximately 4.3 square miles or 11,437 people. The height of 110 feet is very similar to the 111 feet that we calculated due to the ground elevation and antenna height differences. As mentioned by Kim Allen, in order for us to support multiple carriers and co-location, each carrier will require an additional 10 feet or 10-foot slot for their antenna equipment. Beginning at 110 feet, we would locate 4 carriers up to 140 feet, and then additional 10 feet for the monitor design to bring the total height to 150 feet. I also did prepare the compliance report, radio frequency compliance report. Again, that was peer reviewed by 3DB Communications. They also agreed that the facility be in full compliance. As noted in my report, the worst case exposure would be 5% of the limit, which is well within the FCC standards.
And I can have Kim Allen, Attorney Kim Allen touch on that if needed, but my understanding is that, federal law has preempted this field, and I, the hearing examiner, have absolutely no authority to, address this RF. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, it is.
Okay, but there is a report in the record, but in terms of, we're not going to hear, testimony because there's literally no opportunity for the hearing examiner to address that issue. It's something that would need to be brought up with Congress. So,
yeah, so that basically concludes my testimony. There's much more substantial information and technical data and more plots and charts within my justification report, and as indicated, also was peer reviewed by 3D Communications, essentially just trying to provide some of the conclusory remarks here and main information from the report. I'll be available for questions as they come up.
Okay, just a couple things. I think this is probably within your expertise, but you know, many of us or some folks probably have 5G on their phones, or we've been hearing about 5G, and it's, you know, often with these wireless communication facilities, folks would like to know or understand, you know, is this going to become quickly obsolete? You know, if 5G is a different system that doesn't, you know, as far as we're aware, require towers like this, or maybe it does. But can you kind of touch on the issue of obsolescence and why a tower height would even matter if, as things move forward with 5G versus 4G versus, you know, 3G, I guess, at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of confusion that comes about with 5G because there is not only is 5G the next generation of the current long-term evolution system, or LTE 4G network, but it also included some new frequency bands. I think what's important to note is the existing frequency bands are going to be utilized for 5G. So you have low band, I mentioned, and mid band. Those are the 600, 700 megahertz frequency bands, mid band 1900, 2100 megahertz bands. Those frequency bands are going to migrate to 5G. It's basically just a different radio. It's the same frequency. They're going to have similar propagation characteristics because that's what defines the coverage range is the radio frequency of operation. The users are still going to have the same devices. If you went out and got a new cell phone, new smartphone today, it would come with 5G. There's nothing magical about it. It just has a different type of way of managing the data. It allows the system to make greater use of the wireless spectrum, whereas you may have had a smaller channel capable in the past with 4G. You can utilize a larger channel now and combine that spectrum together. But all intents and purposes, the same frequency bands you see there today are going to be there today. There's some higher millimeter wave frequency bands. Those would not be deployed at a facility like this because they would not propagate any distance due to the tree line and the density of trees. They would be used more in like a dense city or urban type of area. So just respect from what you have today, expect that to just migrate to 5G in a very similar manner that 2G migrated to 3G and to 4G.
Well, and so I guess I know years ago when I first, held hearings on wireless communications facilities and was learning, about how these things would evolve, often there was discussion of, under the newer systems, 5G, et cetera, you're going to have lots of, little, whatever you want to call them, facilities, little boxes, little booster stations all over. And that's, but my understanding is that even if that's the case, you still do need towers or information, there have to be parts of the system high enough to, send things out, and then the booster stations kind of improve it. But am I understanding that right? I know it wasn't the most articulate way to just try to describe this. I guess the best question would be, will we get to a point where we don't need towers, and if these become obsolete is the word I'm looking for. Wow. If these become obsolete or not. I mean, do you have any thoughts on these issues, Mr. Conroy?
Yeah, no, your analysis is correct to a degree. What you would expect is the macro towers, the large coverage footprint sites to continue to exist. What we would see happening, especially in areas where there's extreme capacity demands, is what they call a heterogeneous type network start popping up, where you have macro sites that provide the large area of coverage, and then an analysis. I'll give you an example. It may not be a good example for this location, but maybe there's a train station that has a huge amount of wireless.
Mr. Conroy?
My wireless doesn't work.
Hold on one sec, folks. I think we've lost Mr. Conroy momentarily. Well,
Must be using a stem.
you know, he's going to argue it's because they need 5G, but I hear the jokes in the room. I think they're pretty good, but we'll wait a moment. I don't know if the applicant can try to call Mr. Conroy, let him know that he's cut off.
We're doing that right now.
Okay. Feels a bit early for a break, but I'll ask planning staff, we could take a short break while we sort this out if folks
Sorry
need to
about
use the
that.
facility.
Back.
I'm back. Yeah, my system just decided I was talking too much and shut down on me. I don't know what the
I
situation.
think someone in the room may have quipped that this is, shows why wireless doesn't work very well sometimes. And I said, you might respond that this is why folks need 5G. But anyways, Mr. Conroy is back. At the point you cut out, you were sort of explaining for me and the audience that, these existing systems, the macro towers, will continue to be used. But then you were about to explain if you're at a train station and then you cut out.
Yeah, so the example I was using may not be perfect for this particular scenario, but if there's a train station or an area where there's a high amount of wireless usage during certain times of the day that the macro sites can't provide enough capacity to, that would be an instance where one of these small cell 5G nodes might be placed to provide that heterogeneous network where you have a macro overlay and a micro underlay of a 5G system providing this capacity and throughput for particular spots.
And to that end, though, just to be clear, my understanding, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, is that we are not yet at a point where 5G it could exist without the macro systems, right? It's overlaid, and you still do need, these other systems. Or if I'm wrong, please correct me. I just want to make sure I haven't misunderstood.
Yeah, you're still going to need the macro systems to provide that wide area coverage. You're just not going to be able to do that with little point type of smaller nodes that will not provide that coverage, especially in this environment of rolling terrain and heavy tree growth.
Okay. And then along those lines, in terms of the area that you reviewed, am I correct in assuming you were told, to perform your analysis and your drive coverage, with this as the known site that was selected? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And as pointed out, if you have an existing structure that's providing service to an area, to replicate that, you need to be as close to that location as possible at both location, distance, and ground elevation to try to mimic that coverage. As you move away, even a small distance, so does the coverage footprint, and it carries the whole blob of coverage in that direction that you move. And as you move down in ground elevation, you need to raise the antenna height to try to make up the difference. So it's very important to stay within the same proximity of where the existing water tank was to replicate the coverage.
Okay. And then, excuse me, just to further clarify the height request, essentially my understanding from your testimony just now and the materials in the record are the analysis is that the very minimum starting point would be you got to go 110 feet based on the topography and the tree height, correct?
Correct.
And then the additional height that's been suggested is, I'll go 110, and then would be 10 feet per carrier. So in this instance, we have 3 carriers moving to the new facility, and the thought is a 4th would be added. So that'd be 40 feet and then a 10-foot aesthetic screen topper, tree topper. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So, but, and again, to be clear, the height needed to start at 110 per the analysis, in your opinion. You meaning that, you know, at a minute, there's no way that with, you know, 4 carriers, et cetera, you know, you would be able to start lower than 110. Is that, I mean, I'm just trying to, I'm not testifying. I'm asking if that's what the analysis is explaining, right?
That's correct. Yes. It's particularly when you look at both the mid-band and low-band coverage, the difference in ground elevation and the tree height, 110 becomes at minimum antenna height. We reduced the center line to keep the antennas as low as possible. Center line of the antenna will be about 106 to 107 feet. So this is to the tip of the antenna. So we're doing everything we can to minimize the height, but that would be the first carrier minimum installation at 110 to the tip of their antennas, and then proceeding upwards there.
Okay. And then in your experience, you know, I assume you do this kind of work throughout the area. You know, is this common, uncommon for a height like this? Just out of curiosity, you know, to try to set the stage, as it were.
Yeah, this is very typical. I mean, propagation study-wise, in general rule of thumb, propagation being a calculated coverage map versus a drive test, is 15 feet above the median tree line for a minimum antenna height. So that would put us closer to 120 feet minimum. And then what we did with the drive test was further, it allows us to kind of dive in a little bit more detailed than what a calculated propagation map would do, allowed us to reduce it to about 110 feet and get it closer to what the ground elevation changes would be. But this is very typical, yes, typical from what I would expect and what I see for areas that have similar types of, you know, ground elevation, rolling terrain, and high tree growth.
Okay, great. I don't know if that's you again or in the room, but folks can, I don't know if that's in the room, but if folks can mute their telephone.
They're working on it.
Okay.
Turn it on.
Okay, there we go. Great, thank you. Did you have any, sorry, threw me off there. Mr. Conroy, do you have any additional information you wanted to provide? And if not, I was going to see if Kim Allen had anything she wanted to have you touch on.
I have nothing further, unless Kim, you have a question or further questions from anyone later.
I do not. The follow-up questions that the examiner asked are areas that I might have asked, but I think that that we're good with the testimony that you provided. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. So, Mr. Conroy, sounds like you'll be able to stay. And so what I would hope and suggest is that if you can take notes when members of the public are testifying, I'm going to do the same, but we might come, you know, very well could come back around to try to get responses from you if needed. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So at this point, let me go back to Kim Allen and see if there are other members of the applicant team that she was hoping to call on.
This is Kim Allen for the record, and that is the only other member of our team that we were going to have speak today. I want to just conclude the PowerPoint if I may. We have a few more slides.
Okay, go ahead.
Next slide, please. So this we wanted to orient the public and the examiner to kind of where the current tank is, the current water tank site, and the proximity of the proposed site, just to detail, how close it needs to be and how desirable and appropriate the proposed location is. Next slide. So this is the proposed project location. Just wanted to supply some photographs. This is a photograph taken facing northwest. Next slide. And this is facing west. And then this is an overview, actually a detailed map of what's going to be inside the fence, pretty much. Also noting gravel access road over in the upper left-hand corner. I know access was brought up by members of the public in the public comment, and we have adjusted the access to this site to go through the main entrance to the high school itself. So we will not be using Providence Loop Road to obtain access to the site. Also should note that after construction is completed, access to the site is pretty much maybe one vehicle per month per carrier in an ordinary size pickup truck to just do routine maintenance at the site. So it's not going to be a heavy trafficked facility at all, unmanned facility on a day-to-day basis. But this shows the equipment enclosures for all 4 carriers. The center tower, this is 60 by 60 foot equipment space. And also want to note, and this is important for the continued coverage in the event of emergency or power loss that's been discussed, the shared generator. We do have a generator that's sized for all 4 carriers here, and in the event of an emergency or disaster or power outage, the wireless coverage from all 4 carriers will be able to continue here as a result of generator backup, which is something you don't get with the small cells. So this will maintain the backbone of the network during emergencies. Next slide. So we have put a lot of thought into the design, many discussions about what the proposed design should be. And we have arrived at the modified design. We discussed it with city staff because we want to provide the minimum visual impact here. We're locating within existing trees. They provide a natural landscaping background. The multi-carrier design reduces the need for multiple towers in the city of Issaquah, and this is important. The purpose statement in the wireless code section specifically calls out multiple carrier designs as a desired goal for the city of Issaquah. They want multiple carriers on a single facility, and certainly this has been the case with the existing facility with the water tower. But we are carrying that forward and actually adding another carrier to the proposed site to have all 4 major carriers located on a single tower. Each carrier that's located here eliminates the need to build its own tower somewhere. And then also want to focus on the fact that in the community facilities zone where we are, this isn't allowed use, and that's very important because as Mr. Conroy pointed out, the proximity radius we have to relocate this site is very small, and everything surrounding this particular site is residential. So, and that is not an allowed use in residential wireless communications facility. So we really had very few options. Actually, we have one, which is the one before you today. Next slide. Just also wanted to just give you an elevation of the proposed tower design and to illustrate too the tree topper that we talked about, the 10-foot tree topper. You can see that at the very top of this elevation, and if you imagine the facility without it, you can see where it would kind of start taking on that Q-tip type look without the gradual coming to a point at the top as fir trees do. So that is why we've proposed the additional 10 feet of height here. And then at the base, the wireless carrier ground equipment will be concealed behind a 6-foot wooden fence. Also, just pointing out too, that home access will be provided via the north entrance to the district property, not from the south. Next slide. So these are some pictures of actually photo simulations of what it will look like before and after the tower is installed. And the locations that the photos are taken from are in the vicinity map with the little camera icon, and then the site is indicated where it is. So kind of give you an idea, this is from the road there. And as you can see in the proposed photo, you can see some of the monopine or monofir top, portion of it, but again, blended with existing trees. Next slide. This particular slide is taken from like kind of the edge of the neighborhood there, where there's some existing homes. And again, a similar view in the proposed view shed of, the kind of really the very top of the facility, but the base of it and most of the height is buffered by existing landscaping or existing vegetation. Next slide. And again, also from, an area with some homes there, as you can see by the camera icon. And you do see in the existing photograph, kind of a tree line there. And there is a new tree added there when we proposed the monofir. But again, it's set among other vegetation. Next slide. And then again, also from, a different area of the neighborhood. Actually, I don't believe that this one that there is any visibility from this location of the proposed monofir. Next slide. So we want to talk about the variance approval criteria specifically here. This is Issaquah Municipal Code 1804-490B. We are under the previous code because of the vesting of the application with our complete building permit prior to the effective date of the new one. So criterion A requires that the variance is in harmony with the purpose and intent of city ordinances in the comprehensive plan. And we detail on this slide, the various sections of the purpose statement where this particular location, or the particular design that we have, is in harmony with that. We don't have another location, but we are looking to co-locate a number of four carriers on one facility. And there is a preference in the purpose statement for co-location on existing non-municipal structures in the immediate vicinity, and there just aren't any here. There are no other structures of a sufficient height where we could move the antennas to, say, another water tower, something like that. Next slide. The purpose statement also identifies the goal to accommodate the growing need and demand for wireless communication services. And so this particular site will replace the existing coverage for 3, but add a fourth choice for dish service to area residents and businesses. And again, as was demonstrated, we have designed it at the minimum height necessary to provide for all of these providers so that service is uninterrupted, plus a new service provider is an option here. Additionally, there's an intent expressed to ensure that regulations are fair, do not favor earlier applicants, and accommodate the maximum number of users. Well, we are accommodating all 4 major wireless carriers on one stealth tower that is being camouflaged as a fir tree on a site that has existing mature trees. So we would assert that the project meets the intent of the Issaquah Municipal Code. In terms of the comprehensive plan, the utilities element, goal A is to facilitate all utilities needed to support growth in Issaquah. So this will ensure coverage and then add a 4th carrier to expand available coverage to an area of the city that is growing. And in goal J, permit and support development of 21st century telecommunications infrastructure. We are certainly doing that. We are going to be retiring the 20th century infrastructure in favor of the new 21st century infrastructure that's needed to make sure that the coverage is seamless for this area of Issaquah, which is growing rapidly. Next slide. So the variance must not constitute a grant of special privilege that would be inconsistent with the permitted uses or other property in the vicinity and zone in which the subject property is located. The property is in the community facility zone. This is not inconsistent with the use of this particular parcel as a high school. Also would like to draw the examiner's attention to a Washington State case, City of Medina versus T-Mobile. That's at 123 Washington Ave 1995 Pacific 3rd 377. This is a 2004 case to the Court of Appeals. And in that case, the City of Medina appealed a finding by the hearing examiner that variance of setback and height were permissible for a proposed site. And in reviewing variance criteria, very, very similar, if not identical to Issaquah's criteria, found that that a height variance would not constitute a special privilege under the Hobart case, a previous case, unlike an area, unlike a use variance. The special privilege could only be conferred by allowing a use that's not allowed in that particular zone. So we would also add that to the foundation for meeting criteria B. Next slide. Criteria C is that the variance is necessary because of special circumstances related to the location of the property and justification of the height and location of the new tower. Here we have the water tower in a very unique location. We already have 3 carriers on it. And I think that we've discussed via our expert and via the materials we've submitted that this is the only location available to put this tower, is at this location on this property. And it's also the minimum necessary. Next slide. Almost finished. And then we need to demonstrate that variance approval will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare, properties, and/or developments and improvements in the vicinity. Again, we have designed this as a monifer, even though the city does not require that, so that it has tried to minimize to the most extent the visual impacts of this facility on the surrounding properties. It's going to meet all setbacks, all applicable safety codes, and it will continue to provide coverage to the wireless users in this area and provide new coverage for Dish. Additionally, we have designed it to be the minimum height necessary. We've done everything that is feasible to make sure that this will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare and properties and developments in the area. Next slide. Alternative development concepts in compliance with the existing code have been evaluated and undue hardship would result. There are no alternative locations here. And as Mr. Conroy stated in his testimony and his reports, the minimum height necessary to deploy this facility is 110 feet, which is above the height limit set by the city of Issaquah. Facility with lower heights just doesn't work. The antennas are below the surrounding trees. I know that one of the members of the public, proposed multiple facilities at lower heights. Also, the policy of the city of Issaquah and the wireless code favors multiple carriers on one facility as opposed to multiple facilities at lower heights. So if the code were strictly enforced, carriers would be left with significant holes in their networks. Next slide. And then it's required that we demonstrate that this is the minimum necessary to comply with the approval criteria. And I think that case has been made by Mr. Conroy and by the record that we've submitted. So no need to go over it here, other than to note that the city hired its own independent expert who agreed with Mr. Conroy's findings and conclusions in his study. Next slide. So the basis for the variance request is not the result of deliberate actions of the applicant. This parcel is designated for redevelopment for a new school, and there is a water tower, a water tank that is slated to be decommissioned and demolished. The leases with the existing carriers on that give a 30-day notice before demolition, which if you think about relocating an entire network of three carrier networks to another location, 30 days would be absolutely insufficient to find another location, go through permitting, if one were available, and build it, and then, get the, the network back on air. So even if, we don't have any control, none of the carriers have any control over when the school district will give notice that they're going to demolish the facility. The school district certainly hasn't communicated any intent to withdraw that component of the lease or to relieve the carriers from that. And so because of the long lead in planning, I mean, this planning effort for just this alternative site has taken close to 3 years in terms of planning and discussions and now permitting to even get to this point. It's important and it's imperative that the 3 existing carriers get a permanent home for this network installation so that they do not have to interrupt coverage for the citizens here. Next slide. So finally, we do wish to convey to the examiner that the applicants accept the proposed conditions of approval, and we respectfully request approval of the application for the height variance. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Can you touch on what I brought up earlier and sort of either your expertise in this or your experience as an attorney dealing with these types of things, but do you agree that under, the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996 and several cases since then, the issue of RF impacts is beyond the scope of anything that can be addressed either by me, the council? I mean, it's just the federal government has made that clear. Is that your understanding as well? And could you speak on that?
Yes, Examiner Reeves. There is a long, solid pattern of preemption by the federal government over matters of RF exposure. The decision maker on a land use permit, be it a hearing examiner, a city council, or an administrative decision by staff, the decision maker is not permitted to consider any health effects or asserted health effects or fear of health effects from radio frequency exposure in making their decision whether to approve or deny a land use permit. It's simply a well established federal law.
Okay, so concur with that analysis. And then essentially, again, you use the word preemption, but my understanding, especially you did reference the Medina case, and there's a whole line of cases, and there have been additional cases since then. But essentially, well, just to be clear, in this case, if the cell phone tower was meeting the required height, there would be no hearing, right? That's your understanding, to the extent that it would be, allowed outright. I mean, they'd still obviously go through the permitting process, but it wouldn't be the type of permit that would require a hearing. Is that your understanding, or am I
That is true. The only part of the application that required a hearing is the variance itself. No other components of the project are subject to type 4 review.
Okay, so in a way, we're really focused on, the height issue, and to the extent that, is this appropriate to get a height variance? And the materials, have been provided in the record and the analysis and the peer review in terms of why 110 is the starting point. And as you said, in terms of available locations, there's certainly, I think quite a few comments that it doesn't appear any other site wasn't analyzed, but your contention is that there would be no other available site, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. And we would note for the record that there were no appeals to the SEPA determination of non-significance. So I know that some members of the public have incorporated some of the remarks here, kind of overflowing into the SEPA, and we'd ask the examiner to limit his consideration of any SEPA appeals as final. That decision's final.
Okay, and then quite a few, well, sort of the there's sort of a form letter, I think, as you know, that then multiple people kind of signed on and maybe made small adjustments to as part of what was provided to me. And I believe the applicant received those materials. But one of the comments that's made is, the hearing examiner lacks authority to decide this because, a variance of this magnitude should require changing the municipal code by the council entirely. Can you provide any response to that?
Certainly, there is no authority in the code that speaks to the degree of variance that is sought and would put that into a type 5 consideration by the council, or or require some sort of an amendment to the code. I mean, I certainly haven't seen any kind of code regulation that requires that if you are asking for something of a specific size, that you would need to get a code amendment. The code is very clear that this is a type 4 decision by the hearing examiner, and there's no discussion and I don't think any legislative history of capping this variance, the authority to issue a variance at some point and then sending it to the council. I did not see that in my review of the code.
Okay. And then just kind of walking through what some of the comments were. Let's see. Excuse me. Well, and again, I think you've gone through the criteria just now in your PowerPoint, but ultimately, in your mind, what am I, the hearing examiner, reviewing? Am I also looking at the sort of specific approval criteria or requirements related to citing a facility of this type, or am I, the hearing examiner, only doing or addressing the height variance? Is it consolidated and I'm looking at both, or just one or the other? Can you give your thoughts on that issue?
Yes, and in fact, the Issaquah code does not consolidate the general site approval with the variance here. The variance stands alone for the hearing examiner's consideration. And there are jurisdictions and places that do consolidate those, but Issaquah is not one of them.
Sure. So just to be clear, if we're looking at the older version of the code, the former version, because of when this was approved or not approved, but deemed complete in terms of the application, and I recognize that the applicant has also submitted a building permit, so that if there was any concerns about how vesting would work, that's been addressed as well. But my question then, so I'm trying to pull up the former version of the code. So the former version of the code has chapter 1822 is the WCF section, correct?
1822 is the WCF section.
Okay, but point being, my understanding now, based on our conversation, is that the hearing examiner shouldn't be sort of focused on 1822-090, which is the citing criteria, correct?
Correct.
So,
that's subject to a different process and a different decision maker.
Well, so right, that's what I'm saying. So ultimately, I'm sort of not within this section of the code. Where are the criteria that I should be focused on and addressing in the former version of the code?
That would be let's see, give you the citation.
I've got it if you want me to.
I've got it.
Okay.
1804-490, sub B.
Yep. Okay. So that's what I was trying to make clear. So essentially, the section of the code, former version of the code that I'm focused on, is not specific, right, to, wait, hold on, let me pull it up, just make sure I didn't misthink that.
I believe it's the general variance section for all land use applications.
There you go. That was what I was trying to clarify, meaning it's not specific to wireless facilities. This is the general variance criteria, and here a height request. a variance request specifically related to changing, the height that would be allowed for this project is being sought. But this is the general criteria for variance as opposed to anything specifically in the former version of the code related to WCFs, correct?
Right, and I think perhaps the staff citation to 1822, which is the wireless code, might have a bearing on, that just to illustrate that there's no use variance being sought here, that it's a height variance only, not a use variance for this particular zone, because the use is the WCF use is allowed in the community facility zone.
Well, so I guess I just want to kind of think through process. So I guess process-wise, Kim Allen, is it your understanding that were this to be approved by the hearing examiner, all I would actually be approving is sort of the height variance, but then ultimately any decision on the actual, wireless communication facility itself, still would be forthcoming, meaning that staff would then need to finalize any kind of permit, and it's not under my purview to do that. Is that right?
That is correct. That is correct. We have not received any approvals, any land use approvals to date.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to make sure. But process wise, this is happening first because, at least as the applicant would contend, there's no ability to move forward with a facility without getting a height variance, because you need to be minimum 110 according to your materials, for this to work. Accurate?
There's no way for us to meet the height restrictions of the wireless code without a variance.
Right. Okay. Okay. So then I just want to make sure, because as you said, and in a lot of jurisdictions, this type of thing would be consolidated. So I would be essentially reviewing, a request for a wireless communication facility along with a height variance. But here, really, I'm focused on just a height variance that happens to be related to a wireless communication facility that is further addressed, by staff after were this to move forward. Is that your understanding?
That is. That's my understanding, both from our communications with staff as well as my own reading of the code.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. I just want to make sure. So that was helpful to. Okay. Okay, I think, do you have other members of your team at this point you wanted to call on? I may end up having a few more questions, but I think for the moment, the process ones, the big ones I had on process have now been addressed.
Yeah, and I have members of my team standing by, but hadn't planned to present any additional testimony in this portion of the hearing. I did want to just let you know, based on the public comment that I've seen, that the applicants are not going to assert the 120-day rule for having the, from date of complete application to hearing examiner decision. The applicants would waive that.
Oh, great. Okay. Okay, great. Well, so I think at this point, it's good that there are members of your team there. What I would suggest would be, why don't we, well, I'll say we'll take a break here in a sec before we do it, just because I think we're at a 90-minute mark. It's usually a good time. But what I'm going to suggest is we will take a break. When we come back, then we'll hear from members of the public that are testifying. And then after hearing from members of the public, if there are members of the applicant team or city staff that it would be appropriate to call on, we can do that at that point. Does that make sense to you, Kim Allen?
It does. It does.
Okay, Douglas Yarmick, anything before we break, as it were? I think, but now would probably be a good moment to do so.
Nope.
Okay, Candace Bear, our clerk, just want to make sure technology-wise we're on the same page. So I'd say it's a 2:36. Why don't we come back and let's say 2:50? That's about 14 minutes.
Can you say that time frame again?
Well, let's plan on being back at 10 till, so about 14 minutes from now. Give folks a chance to use the facilities.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. So we'll be back in about 12, 13 minutes and get into public testimony at that time. Thank you.
going to Superior Court. There's more appeals changed and in procedures on June 1st. And you're vested to the standards in the code, but you're not vested to procedures. And the procedures say Superior.
That I don't know.
I mean, all this is being done because you were told the water tower is coming down, right? As part of the school project. And school project that they never had.
And hey, folks, your examiner's back. So, and for folks in the room there, we're going to try to get started again. So if you can take your seats.
Thank you.
All right. For those that are participating, if you can either quietly, we're going to try to get started here. And with that, planning staff, you ready to recommence?
Yes, planning staff is ready.
And Kim Allen on the applicant side?
The applicant team is ready.
Okay, and Candace Bear, are we ready to start recording?
Yes, we are.
Okay, if you want to start the recording. I think we're recording now, right? Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, let's make it official. Back on the record here in the city of Issaquah, related to number VAR 220003 on September 19th. We took a break so folks could use the facilities, but essentially we are now at the point of the hearing where we were going to hear from members of the public that may be interested in testifying. There was a sign-in sheet and a list was provided to me by planning staff. And so the plan had been to work through these. And the first person, in fact, we were going to hear from would be Roberta Brown, who I believe was going to make a request in addition to wanting to testify. So I'm happy to start with Roberta Brown, but the plan is, again, to work through the list and then hear from folks that may be participating remotely. And as we do this, though, I do want to stress that my role is limited, and I'm tasked with looking at the criteria for approval, and this isn't so much a balancing process where hearing identical comments from multiple people, while I do appreciate, and I have again a significant number of comments in the record. If you agree with your fellow citizens, feel free to come up and say, I concur with what everyone said, and then maybe focus on any new or additional items. But ultimately, my role isn't to sort of check how many people are for or against. That is not the process here. The process is looking at the specific criteria for approval and determining whether or not I determine that a height variance is appropriate. So with that, we'll have Roberta Brown be, I believe, our first person testifying. So
You can come right up.
thank you. And I know that the several comments have been submitted by Roberta Brown throughout this process. I think an additional one came in today that was provided and will be provided to me. But I have read the other multiple comments that were received by you. Or sent in by you, they were received and they are part of my record. So thank you. With that, I'll get you sworn in. Okay, Roberta Brown?
Sure.
Hi. And do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could just state and spell your name for the recording.
Roberta Brown, ROBERTA BROWN.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. And I was told by planning staff, my clerk, that you had a motion of some kind or an inquiry you wanted to start with. Is that right?
That's right.
Well, why don't you start with that?
Thank you. Yes, as a party of, in accordance with the rules of procedure for land use applications and appeal of administrative decisions, I would like to make the request that this hearing be continued beyond today. It is scheduled from 1 to 3, and it is now, I think, 2 minutes to 3, and because of the very long testimony on the part of the applicant, those wishing to make comment have not had an opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Okay. Ultimately, I am going to deny the request to the extent that, and I'll clarify that, I didn't realize it had been set for a specific time period like that. Often, you know, those are somewhat arbitrary, and the key is to ensure that, you know, if folks are here during the allotted time period, they kind of know what's going on. And so this is what I'm ultimately going to suggest. As far as I'm aware, from planning staff, you know, we are able, technologically speaking, to go beyond the 3 o'clock mark, and I believe the room will continue to be available. That said, if folks, you know, had planned hopefully to testify prior to 3 and feel like they would be unable to, I am happy to leave the record open for them to submit written comments in lieu of public testimony if they need to leave soon. That would be my suggestion. So essentially, if you had intended on testifying, but you are not able to because of the timing issue, I would say today's Tuesday, just by the end of, we could say Thursday, make sure you send Candace Bear, the clerk, you know, or other members of staff, any written comments in lieu of testimony. That would be my suggestion. But let me make sure, Kim Allen, any objection on the applicant's behalf to that process?
No objection.
Okay, and does that make sense to you, Doug Yormick, on behalf of the city?
It makes sense.
And Candace Bear, our clerk, can you verify that I'm correct in my understanding of the technology and the room availability?
Absolutely, yes. By end of day Thursday, we'll be fine.
Sure, but then also right now,
Yes, we have the room available for another 2 hours.
Sure, and then the Teams meeting isn't going to kick anyone off, right?
No, we'll not kick anybody off.
Okay, and just to be clear, when I say we're leaving the record open for a couple days for your written testimony in lieu of what you would testify to today, the intent isn't to then have, you know, a flood of additional, you know, new materials or anything to that effect. It's essentially, you know, my name is so-and-so. I attended the meeting either in person or on Teams, and because of the timing issue, I was not able to testify during the 1 to 3 o'clock window. Here is my, you know, testimony written in lieu of the what I would have said at the meeting, and then provide those comments, and then ultimately we'll make sure you. Well, what's the best way for folks to get these to planning staff, Candace Bear?
They're more than welcome to either send an email to me and or Doug Yormick, and we'll coordinate together to make sure that we have either one of our emails available to them.
Okay, well, in case folks need to leave, can we just give an email that can be used?
Absolutely. Well, we'll say it out loud. I will give it to you in writing as well if you need it. It is CANDY, B as in boy, at Issaquah, WA.gov. I will also place it in the chat in the Teams meeting.
Okay, great. And I can't stress enough that ultimately, I, the hearing examiner, give equal weight to written communication versus public communication. I know that process-wise, you know, folks feel that, you know, taking the time to come testify in person is important, and I'm not denying that that's a valid thought. But ultimately, in terms of, how I weigh things and the process. Written comments are just as powerful, as it were, as any publicly spoken testimony. And again, ultimately, I am the decision maker. My decision could then potentially be appealed, but so I just want to be clear on versus, I want to make sure the council knows, or often folks are worried about that. But in this particular case, the decision maker is me, and any appeal would be to Superior Court. So wanted to be clear about that. So with that, ultimately, as I noted, if folks do need to leave, you can again submit your testimony as written testimony in lieu of comments by the end of the day, Thursday. But we'll go ahead and get started now, and hopefully we'll be able to wrap up while we still have the room. So, and again, folks, hoping to limit to 3 minutes or so. And if you've already sort of the thought or comments been made by someone prior to you, feel free to say, I agree, and here's additional thoughts. And then again, if there are questions, we won't have a back and forth, but say, I have a question about this, and I'm hoping to get an answer at some point later. So, and I'll write that down. And after we've heard from everyone, we'll go back around to the applicant team and staff. Okay. So with that, Roberta Brown, you wanted to start. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your understanding of my question. One preliminary thing, I believe I've been reading through all the code, and that co-location is not required. It is suggested or recommended in several places. So I think that needs to be corrected. My comments, first of all, I'll go back to our argument that before us is a request virtually to double the permitted height of a macro tower, and as a consequence to allow for one of the heaviest antenna burden structures in this entire region. We're talking 30 antennas on one structure, and that's just for starters. Once a new tower is in place, the entire tower falls in the hands of the FCC, which, as we know, is very favorable to the telecommunications industry. And I believe that the hearing examiner has the full right to refer this to the city council. Because this request, by virtue of its magnitude, far surpasses what constitutes a variance, it cannot help but violate any attempt whatsoever to conform to the variance criteria. And we've written that much of what was said is simply does not hold. In short, granting this permit for a macro tower is of such magnitude that it must require a rewriting of code to allow for significant additional macro tower height, for which the city council alone has the authority. My second point, virtually all of the required and related application documents for this variance request are deeply embedded in and dependent upon documentation in the fully built out school complex. This enmeshment is a second unquestionable reason for referral of this variance request to the city council. Council members have labored intensely and in depth over thousands of pages of documentation that have gone into permitting the school project. They are versant in its overwhelmingly complex detail. Command of such complexity surpasses the role and the expectations of our hearing examiner. Finally, we are told that a city and an ISD official have together made some sort of presumably non-binding agreement to proceed with deconstruction of the water tower. What we are talking about here is clearly one of the most ideally located, finely functioning, and non-obtrusive towers in the entire city and extended area. And we have been assured that ample room remains on the tower for the addition of a fourth planned carrier, dish. However, most shockingly, most disconcertingly, we are told that this agreement is to proceed with the deconstruction of our water tower regardless of the school project taking place, thus forcing construction of a new tower. To lawfully proceed in such a manner, that is, apart from construction of the school complex, deeply enmeshed in permit, would necessarily imply that the land is vacant. And this would legally call for an entirely new application. One cannot argue, on the one hand, for a variance on the basis of school construction, forcing water tower removal, then say, oh, by the way, we've decided that we'll go ahead and deconstruct the tower, thus forcing a new tower, even though our rationale and all our supporting documentation for the new tower are null and void because they're based on school construction. Look, it's got to be one application or the other. The telecommunications industry is not beyond the law. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Roberta Brown. And my understanding is you had an additional written comment that was provided earlier that I included as 22A in my record, correct?
Correct. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. The next person I had on the list here would be Diane Exreed.
Exreed.
Exreedy? Okay. And thank you. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do so swear.
Thank you. And if you could just state and spell your name for us.
Diane, D-I-A-N-E, Exreed, E-X-E-R-I-E-D-E.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I am approaching from a slightly different angle on this subject. So you'll be hearing testimony that you haven't heard before. First of all, I want to enter into evidence, and the city clerk has a copy of this document, and she will arrange to have it copied and sent to you. It is the City of Issaquah notices City Council decision of April the 19th, 2022, which was the approval of the master site plan and site development permit for the construction of the new consolidated high school and elementary school campus. Okay, there's more to it. Okay. As a condition of approval, the City Council, in its wisdom, assigned 58 conditions to their approval. And I am going to refer to conditions number 44 and 45. Okay, and I'll speak to that when it comes into it.
Well,
Testimony.
Okay. So I will get that as part of the record, and I know that you want me to look at conditions 44 and 45, and I will certainly do so. But with that, please proceed. But I'm also, trying to worry about timing as well. So.
Okay. Well, this is brief. There's not much to it. I am starting with under subsection D of the variance criteria. So, I mean, we've all had that. Granting of such variance would not be materially detrimental to public welfare or interest to the property or improvements in the vicinity and zone in which the subject property is situated. And I think you could tell from Attorney Allen's PowerPoint presentation that the cell tower site location is very close to Providence Point's property line and building structures in our Hilltop Village. So now getting back to items 44 and 45, which regards stormwater runoff from the Issaquah School District property into Providence Point's private stormwater system. And this system eventually drains into Laughing Jacobs Creek, which is a spawning ground for the kokanee salmon. The kokanee do not migrate and spend their entire life cycle in fresh water. They're freshwater fish. They have status under Washington State Department of Wildlife's Priority Habitat and Species Program, and the fish require protective measures for their survival due to the population status and sensitivity to habitat change. They are of cultural importance to the Snoqualmie tribe, and they're also important to the cities of Issaquah and Sammamish, who have developed a Laughing Jacobs Basin plan for this watershed, which was adopted in January 2022. And there are projects underway. I believe Sammamish has completed theirs for fish passages, and the city of Issaquah is currently constructing one of Lake Sammamish Parkway. The plastic waste problem. Verizon plans to disguise the cell towers of monopine fir tree to avoid a visual blight impact. The fill branches and needles will require ongoing replacement, as they are subject to weather conditions result in plastic waste debris field under the tree, in quotes. These plastic bits will continue to break into smaller microplastic pieces, and without mitigation will eventually find their way into Providence Point storm system, and from there into Laughing Jacobs Creek. Okay, and so now we're back to, and I'm almost finished, conditions. Okay, condition number 44 refers to the Southwest Basin stormwater system shall be designed and constructed not to adversely impact the existing storm system in Providence Point, ensure that the historical discharges from the site into Providence Point system are not exceeded during and following construction. This is referring to construction of the school. This condition will be addressed during the site work permit number 1 permit review and approval. And number 45, turbid runoff is not allowed to discharge to the Providence Point detention system during and following construction. To protect the downstream private system, this project must provide a temporary bypass to route runoff to a temporary surface water containment system or other best managed practice on site during construction and following construction at any time prior to completion of the permanent stormwater system. The best management practices shall be reviewed and approved during site work 1 permit. I'm requesting the following conditions be added to the decision to approve the height waiver. 1.
Okay, so sorry, just want to make sure I understand where we're at. I think what you're essentially saying, or the argument is, you know, there are conditions of approval that have been put on the school project, and one of them relates to stormwater, and you have concerns that, you know, the cell tower, were it to be approved, hasn't sort of adequately coordinated, and now you're going to ask for conditions that relate. Is that right?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
It's about the plastic waste debris that falls off the trees. And I mean, that happens, and it will happen because we have sustained winds in the winter storms, 40 to 50 miles an hour. And, you know, so those needles are going to come down. They're going to be washed into our own stormwater system. And from there, they're going to go down into Laughing Jacobs Creek, which is where our stormwater system empties.
Okay.
Okay, the Issaquah student, this is a condition, number 1. The Issaquah School District should be required to honor the previous referenced April 2022 conditions of approval regarding construction on their property as it relates to stormwater drainage. 2, the Issaquah School District may either install a temporary water containment system until their permanent stormwater system is completed, or they may choose to manually remove the plastic particles from the debris field during the winter storm season, which would be approximately November through April. And if they opt to remove the particles, we request that an observer from Providence Point be present. Or 3, another solution would to have Verizon modify the monopond treatment and limit it solely to the topmost portion of the tower visible above the tree line. Thank you for the opportunity to provide input.
Thank you. And the sort of 3 conditions you're hoping be added, do I have that document in the record?
No, but it's right
Okay,
here.
if you can, before you leave, or if you can provide a copy or coordinate with staff, I think it'd be helpful, for me to have, the written version of that, so that I don't, if I'm citing to it, I get it right. I want to make sure I get the language right. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, great. The next name on the list I have here is Jay Sternoff. Thank you for being here. I'll swear you in. And do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in testimony you give here today?
Yes, I do.
And if you could spell your name for the recording.
Jaysternoff.
And did I pronounce it right?
Sternoff.
Sternoff. Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Sternoff. Go ahead.
My name is Jay Sternoff. I reside in the largest senior community in Issaquah called Providence Point. It dates back to 1985. We're a community of more than 1,300 residents. This property was extensively built prior to annexation to the city of Issaquah. I appear before you today to request that you continue this decision on the variance for the 150-foot monopole cell phone tower disguised as a fir tree. I guess I have to also add, I'm glad they're at least calling it a high-quality tower as a mono fir as opposed to a low-quality. A tower that is well above the current city of Issaquah 85-foot maximum. The adjacent property to the north was owned by a 501c3 corporation and was condemned through eminent domain by the Issaquah School District to build a high school with a stadium as well as an elementary school on the property, mixing elementary students with teenage drivers on the same property. The property did not comply with Issaquah zoning, so the property size exception was granted by the Issaquah School District to be built on a parcel that heretofore in the city of Issaquah has never previously been allowed. To allow this, they drafted 52 conditions, not just the 2 that were referenced by a lady before me, were established, such as a minimum tree canopy and wetland mitigation that must be addressed before permit to proceed with any construction on the property, including the cell tower. To build the cell tower at the designated location, the tree canopy minimum threshold would be exceeded. As well as to construct the tower, the wetland would have to be mitigated prior to any construction. In the CEPA A220006 building ID applicant response to CEPA, the memo dated 5/30/23, the applicant stated, when the Issaquah School District received approval and conditions of approval for a larger site, any violations of these conditions may put the CEPA review of non-significance in jeopardy. In the PeerCon solutions evaluations of frequency that was provided as evidence earlier, prepared for links, they only used one transmitting location to do all their assessments. Nowhere else on the property was that assessment taken. Could it have been 50 feet higher? Could it have been 50 feet lower on the property? Could have been further east or further west? That was not taken into account because it appears Issaquah School District said you're going to put it right in the middle of the tree canopy. So this resulted in requesting the monofill to be 60 feet taller than the surrounding than exists at this time, currently allowing to accommodate a 4 cellular carrier, all providing current 4G service only and not 5G, as it would be an increased benefit to the community. In my lifetime, I've negotiated 3 cellular tower agreements. All were for a fixed term, usually for 20 years, and sometimes they had incremental increase based on the time and not the number of carriers attached to the towers. With the significant financial shortfalls of the Issaquah School District have on this property, it would seem financially prudent for the school district to have additional increased income and when new cell phone companies are added, as they will be over time. I know it won't make up the $100 million shortfall that they have, but it would go a long way towards trying to help. So in conclusion, I'm asking for a continuance until all these 52 points are evaluated. Thank you for your time.
And sorry, just to clarify that point, Mr. Sternoff, and I'm not going to make a decision on that today. I'll have to think it through. But is the request essentially that, you know, continue it until all the school issues are worked out? I mean, like no appeal periods and all the, whatever, all the criteria have been met, i.e. they've already built the school. Is that the request?
No, what I'm really saying is not until the school makes the decision and they start their application can construction of the tower take place. Otherwise, what happens is there are 52 conditions of the school, and if the cell tower advocates start doing things that are in violation of any of those 52, it puts the entire project at risk, and all you do is come back after the fact and say, slap my hand, I'm sorry, we shouldn't have done that.
Got it. So I guess it's a timing.
So those have to be resolved first, otherwise you can't build the tower in violation of the conditions on that property.
Okay, no, I understand. I just wanted to, I want to make sure I understand your argument, and now I think you've made it very clear.
It can't be an 85-foot tower, it can't be a 20-foot tower, and it can't be a 150-foot tower. And therefore, they do have to be tied together, even though I heard you say earlier that your decision is, can it be taller than 85 feet and up to 150?
Okay, great. And the written comments you had, have they been provided? If you'd like.
I have not provided, I will provide them.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Sternoff.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, the next name I had was Dave Osmer.
Good afternoon.
And thank you. Good afternoon. And do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in any testimony you give here today?
I do.
Great. And if you could just spell your name for the audio.
Certainly. William David Osmer, O-S-M-E-R, 22433 Southeast Highland Lane, Issaquah.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Osmer. Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for extending the comment period. I appreciate that. I strongly oppose the granting of this request for this variance for several reasons. Among them, the request fails to meet several of the city's variance code or variance approval criteria as listed on the city's website. I will not repeat them all because Roberta has done a good job on criterion B, which I believe does result in or does constitute a grant of special privilege. But I will proceed to talk about criterion D. And despite the applicant's testimony, I believe that it is not met. And that's the one that says the granting of the variance will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the property or improvements in the vicinity. The proposed tower clearly does not meet this test. It would be approximately, as already mentioned, 150 feet from two residential buildings in the adjacent Providence Point community. Should the tower structural supports fail because it's really top heavy at its base in a severe storm or a major earthquake, given its height, the top of the tower could potentially hit one of these structures, endangering the residents within. It would also be highly likely to fall across the only emergency access road to the proposed schools on the property, thus impeding emergency responders to reaching the school buildings in a crisis. Additionally, and according to the American Real Estate Association, such a tower would lower the property values in the adjacent residential developments by roughly 10%, thus costing residents tens of thousands of dollars of lost value when they choose to sell. I'm going to go off script for a minute and just, Jay has already mentioned this, but the proposed school project is now over $100 million over their budget estimates. They do not have this money, and they're only now beginning to talk about a potential bond issue in 2024. If that fails, they will not have the funds to do this project. And the contention that there are no other sites available is also not, I don't believe, to be true. The school district suggested that they put it on top of Pine Lake Middle School, of the high school building if it gets built. And they declined that option. They could also put it on top of Pine Lake Middle School, which is less than a half mile down the road. Last of all, why don't they consider coordinating with the city of Issaquah and top the trees so they don't have to be as high? Given the failures that I wanted to second Roberta's comments about the criterion B. Given those failures to comply with the city's approval criteria, I believe the hearing examiner should deny the variance request, or at a minimum, refer it to, without determination, to the city council. Thank you for your consideration of these issues.
Great. Thank you so much. And this will be true as we keep going, but for folks that have those written comments that they're reading off, if you'd like them to be a part of the record, provide a copy to our clerk and we'll make sure they're in the record. And also, again, if you want to, quote, go off script like just happened with Mr. Osmer, I, in fact, prefer that. If you want to come up and say, I do have written comments that I'd like in the record, but in addition, here's my off script notes, rather than read things in, I think that'll be helpful. But thank you for your comments, Mr. Osmer.
Thank you.
Okay, the next name I had is a Pat Templeton.
I'm Pat Templeton, and I swear to tell the truth.
Great, thank you. You knew where I was going. If you could just spell your name for the audio as well.
Templeton. First of all, I'm sorry you're not here. I don't like talking to all these cameras. I'm here mostly as an expert on community. We've talked with technicians and you've heard all that. I won't go there. My husband was a professor of art education, and I was a longtime teacher of art in a community college at Whatcom County. I claim to be an expert because I have lived in Chicago, Petersburg, Virginia, Columbus, Ohio, Austin, Texas, Bellingham, long time, Lopez Island, et cetera, et cetera. I came here because of the quality of life. I know this is an issue. Aesthetics probably doesn't hold much value, but that's why I came here. And that's why many, many, many others, seniors, have come here to spend the last years and to enjoy this unique community Providence Point has 1,000, over 1,000 units. Of those 1,000 units, the lucky ones may have 2 people in them. We're surrounded, and we surround this site, mostly not residents, but seniors. And we came here for the quality of life. We came here for the aesthetics. We came here for the whole combination, which includes cloud looking, sky viewing, etc. I have strong, strong objections, and I'm sure many of the residents in this immediate community, and I am on the other side of the fence. I'm at 22459 Southeast 42nd Terrace. But at any rate, you should not allow this high-rise tower. You just should not allow it. It isn't here. It hasn't been here. There are a ton of many, many alternatives. We got lots of technicians, lots of experienced people who can figure out a different way of getting this message across. But you should not intrude on the thousands of lives around that like to look at trees and clouds and not have the skyscape destroyed. Please, please do not allow this long-term high footprint on a school property. And I hope you get better. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Pat Templeton. Okay. And then the next name I had was Brenda Kirk.
Like Pat, I'm ready to say, I swear to tell the truth. My name is Brenda Kirk, K-I-R-K. And I'm.
You're all stealing my thunder, but thank you for being here, Brenda Kirk. Please go right ahead.
Okay, we're just trying to move things along.
I appreciate it.
I'm speaking for myself and my husband now. He's the next name on the list, but we need to go because we have people coming for dinner tonight. I wanted to say that I totally agree with everything Pat just said. I think that we look out, we live on 42nd Terrace as well at 22445. And we have a sunroom that looks out onto the vista that will have this tower. It's beautiful right now. My husband and I sit there, we watch the hummingbirds come. We always comment about how lucky we are to have such a beautiful park-like setting. And the tower is going to totally destroy that look. The pictures that were shown were all taken, that you received, that we all saw in Ms. Allen's presentation, were all taken from what were called residential areas. These were single family homes like most of us lived in most of our lives, but they were not taken from Providence Point. I spoke with Ms. Allen. She assured me they would not be taking down any trees, which pleased me. But the truth is that there are no trees in that area to block what we are going to see, what's going to change our view of the structure. That's basically all I wanted to say. I hope that you will not approve this variance.
Great, thank you. And for folks like Brenda Kirk that might need to leave, I just want you to know if you have provided or you can reach out to staff and say, I would like a copy of the hearing examiner decision when it comes out. Well, you know, when my decision does come out, we'll make sure that you get a copy in the form in which you'd prefer. So I just wanted, for anyone that might need to leave, I want you to know that that process exists and we want to make sure folks are looped in, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. And just to be clear, Tom Kirk is leaving, not testifying, right?
We have to go get dinner ready.
Okay, well, you know, you're the boss. I'm sure you said it as eloquently as he would have, if not better. So have a great dinner. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Okay, so then the next name I had, I believe would be Linda Fieldhouse that was interested in testifying. And for folks online, we will get to you, I promise.
Is the Linda Fieldhouse still in the building, or did she have to take off? Linda had to take off.
Okay, so those comments might come as written comments. Next would be Peter Hirsch.
Is there Peter Hirsch in the house? Peter took off as well.
Okay, and I believe there was one other person that had indicated you.
It's physically still here, I believe it's Daniel Sabin.
Sreebney.
Daniel Srivas?
Sreebney, it's a hard one.
Sreeby, is that what?
That's
okay.
right. You got it.
We'll get you sworn in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could spell that for us.
I definitely better spell that. Daniel Sreebney, Daniel, last name S for Seattle, R for Rose, B for Bellevue, NY for New York. And don't ask me how they came up with that at Ellis Island.
I got you. Sreeby. Okay, sorry. Thank you. Excellent. All right, thank you for being here. The New York thing threw me, but I appreciate it. I'm an NYU grad myself. But with that, Mr. Sreeby, go ahead.
All right, well, thank you. And first of all, I want to thank, I appreciate the hard work that's been put into all this by the people working for the city of Issaquah and by the applicants. I am a Verizon wireless customer, so I have a vested interest in this on a personal basis. That said, I strongly encourage you to delay any decision on this variance request because it is based on presumptions that should not be taken as given. It is based on presumptions that the school district project to put 2 schools in this area is going to take place as originally proposed, even though it has been clearly established and in public record that for funding reasons and for other issues and for the changes in demography and student projection rates, it is quite possible that 1 school or no schools will be built in this area. It is there also based on the presumption that the school or current design proposed for this requires that the tower go in the one specific location at a lower altitude, when that's something the school district told the applicants and is not necessarily a requirement. It is also based on the presumption that the water tower on which the current antennas exist will have to be taken down for the projects, which again, given the uncertainty of the projects going ahead, is not the case. And it is my understanding that it has not been clearly established that there is any need to take the water tower down with the current services provided other than the school projects as originally designed. For all these reasons, it would be presumptive and hasty to move ahead with a variance request, and therefore it should be held off until it is established where the school district is going. Not until everything is finally constructed, but it's established whether it is going ahead in any form or in a format that could allow either the current water tower system to stay or the facility to be sited at a higher elevation within the property. I finally, on a personal note, I have over 4 decades and continuing in government service at the federal level. I have a deep respect for procedures and for policies and the complexities of decision-making and a respect for your role as hearing examiner. But I have to say I'm perturbed by the offhand and what I found to be a gratuitous comment about receiving multiple written comments from one individual who has testified at this hearing. Your cavalier decision not to accept a continuance request, which was based on times established in a written communication from the city to interested people who wish to testify in person. And as we saw, we're not able to. And by the content and manner in which you ask questions of the city review committee and of the applicants. This has all left me deeply disturbed at how this procedure has been handled today, and I wish that be noted for the record. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Moving forward, I believe then that concludes those in the room that we were going to hear from. Does that seem correct, Candace Bear?
Is there anybody else who would like to have any physical public testimony today that has not had a chance to physically in the building? I am not seeing any. You may proceed.
Okay, great. So next, we will move to members that are participating via the Teams meeting. And if folks are interested, I would suggest you hit the raise hand feature, but we do have one person that has phoned in. So I wanted to check with that person first, because I don't believe they can use the raise hand feature. But the person whose phone number ends in 30, if you, is it *6, Candace Bear? Does that seem right? To unmute. I'm trying to figure out how we unmute the person that may have been a call-in.
I'm not seeing somebody that doesn't have a name.
Oh, okay. I don't know then. I see a number that ends in 30, but maybe I'm incorrect. Sorry, let me pull that list up again. Okay, well, they haven't appeared to try to unmute, so we'll move forward. And then folks, again, who are virtually, we do have that raised hand feature enabled. So if you're interested in testifying, now would be the opportunity to do so. Okay, I have a James Hanson. Well, went up and then it went right back down. Okay, James Hanson has used the raise hand feature. So James Hanson.
Yeah, I couldn't get it to stick there. As I understand, and I'm not, oh, yes?
I'm going to swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in any testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could just spell your name for the audio recording.
It's Hanson.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, James Hanson.
So there's two things that I'm hoping for with this tower, should it be constructed. The first one is that it would actually improve the coverage. My parents live in the north end of Meadows Village, and the coverage there it's terrible. It's unusable. And I was hoping that in building a new tower, we would get better coverage than exists now. And it was not clear from the report whether that would be the case. The second thing that I was hoping for was an explanation of the tower height. If I understood the engineer, each cell provider requires 10 feet. Okay, and if I understand this right, and I assume I'm wrong, but at 110 feet, you start with, say, Verizon. 120 feet, you've got T-Mobile. 130 feet, you have AT&T, and that at 140 feet, you're supposed to have Dish, but at 140 feet, you're supposed to have the top to the tower, which I assume that top part cannot house one of the carriers. So something is wrong about the measurements there. And so I was hoping, I'm hoping that can be explained, either one of those things, but that is my wish for this tower, should it be built.
Okay, just to make sure, your point is a math point, right, James Hanson? You're saying if you start at 110 and you go 10 feet to 120 for the first, right, 130, 140, that's only 3 carriers. We're talking about a fourth carrier would put us at 150, and then a topper would put us ultimately at a 160, right?
That's the way it sounds to me, but maybe I didn't understand it right.
Sure, but good. Thank you for pointing that out, and we will, after we've heard from folks, try to get clarification on that. Okay, as well as the issue of improvement or not, were this to move forward. Great, thank you so much. Okay, moving forward then, are there others that were on the Zoom sort of their teams interested? If so, please use the raise hand feature. Or if that's not working, you can I believe in chat indicate that you were hoping to testify. Okay, doesn't appear that anyone is jumping to hit the raised hand feature.
Andrew, I would like to cut in for a moment and just in
Okay.
case they don't understand the software, if you clearly can just unmute yourself and then announce that you would like to make a comment at this time, you can do so as well.
Oh, thank you. The request from staff was just in case folks can't figure out how the raise hand feature works. If you are someone that is participating remotely, if you can try to unmute yourself to let me know if you were hoping to testify, we can do that now. So if folks we're hoping to testify and can't get the raise hand feature sorted, if you unmute yourself and want to testify, now would be the time. I'll only do one at a time, but now would be your opportunity to try to do so. This doesn't appear. Okay. Okay, it doesn't appear that there are others interested. So at this point, what I would suggest is we'll go first to the applicant, maybe to answer those direct questions that were just asked in terms of the tower height math problem that was just presented, along with the question about the improvement or would there be improvement were this to move forward. And then, I think the applicant at that point, if they wanted to address or respond to the other issues that were raised, these include, issues related to the safety with the height, issues related to, and this was a big one, but the relationship to the school in terms of construction or timing, or, if the school doesn't happen, what would be the impact, et cetera. Information on property values was sort of new, that hadn't really been raised. Quality of life and aesthetics obviously were raised. If Kim Allen, especially in terms of being an attorney, if you can speak to or touch on your understanding of the code, and is there a possibility for this to be moved forward somehow to the council as opposed to having me make the decision, and give you a chance to touch on that. I believe there are a few more, but let's start there. So I'll turn to Kim Allen, and then if you have any members of your team you wanted to call on after that, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reeves. In terms of the Mr. Hansen's question about improved coverage, I'm not sure where the north end of Meadows Village is in respect to the coverage area for this facility. So the goal right now is to continue the existing coverage of the 3 existing carriers on there, because we didn't want to add additional height to the facility. That said, there's lots of optimization and work that can be done with different frequencies and radios that can optimize coverage. The answer to that question is I don't know, but I'm happy to have Mr. Conroy answer. He had another hearing scheduled, and so he is not on the bridge, but I would ask leave to put an answer in to Mr. Hansen's question while the record's open until Thursday.
Sure. Okay, so the request then is with the record being open a few additional days, that we get a specific answer to that specific question from Mr. Conroy, and we'll add that as part of the record for the hearing today. Is that right, Kim Allen?
That is the question. That is my request.
Okay. I will certainly grant that request. So with that, go ahead with the next one had to do with the math.
Okay, and those that know me well know that math is not my strongest suit, but as I understand it, the 110 feet is the top of the bottom carrier's antennas. So that's the top of their antennas. Separated by 10 feet, you find the top of the second carrier's antennas at 120 feet. The top of the third carrier is at 130. The top of the fourth carriers is at 140, and then from 140 to 150 is the tree topper. And I'm going to look to the members of my team that are on the bridge to open your mic and if I am incorrect in that.
So in terms of the math issue, Kim Allen was saying her understanding is that in fact, the 110 foot point is that would essentially be 100 to 110 would be the first carrier. And then there would be the second carrier would start at 110. But Pat Evans, I believe, is on behalf of the applicant team. So if you can unmute yourself, Pat Evans. Or if we can try to unmute Pat Evans, I see the hand raised, but we're hoping to get unmuted.
Let's try this. There.
I can hear you. I don't believe you were sworn in, so I'll swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in testimony you give here today?
I do.
Okay, and can you spell your name for the audio and explain then who you are?
Yes, my name is Patrick Evans. I represent the applicant Verizon Wireless. I am a consultant at Lynx and worked on preparing the applications.
Okay.
Kim's characterization of the tip heights is absolutely correct. The bottom tip height is at 110 and then 10-foot increments from there. Take the top of the highest set of antennas to 140 feet. The additional 10 feet to 150 is for aesthetic purposes, does not support any additional antennas above a tip height of 140.
Well, and I guess just to think that through, so essentially the materials that have been provided indicate that, because of trees, et cetera, topography, that 110 is the minimum. Is it that the first 10 feet from, or call it 9 feet from about 109 to, or 100 to about 109 is sort of equipment that isn't impacted, and then the height at about 110 is, where antennas would go, and that's the lowest height, but it would be the top of the first carrier. Am I understanding that right?
The first carrier is from 100 to 110.
Okay, so I guess that's clarifies that, but what I'm saying is that there's been reference in the materials to 110 being the minimum. Is it that 110 is the minimum height for the top of the first carrier, or essentially 100 feet is the minimum because 100 to 110 is where the first carrier goes?
The 110 is the minimum height for the top of the first carrier. You're correct.
Okay. So 110 is what the applicant identified as the minimum height that would allow for one carrier, and that would include the top and clearing, any of the problematic things that would need to be cleared essentially. And then there would be potentially 3 carriers above, which is where we go 110 to 20, 20 to 30, 30, 40, and then there's the sort of aesthetic feature in addition. Accurate?
That is correct.
Okay. Were there any other comments or thoughts or anything you wanted to share before we move on at this point, Pat Evans?
No, I would prefer, if need be, I will answer specific questions raised by the audience.
Well, that's not possible. So not the way this process works. So if you were aware of specific things you wanted to touch on, but we're not going to be able to do a back and forth. So
all right, let me talk on one other issue, which was the safety issue.
Okay.
That safety and fall down issue is examined thoroughly during the building permit process. The tower itself and the structural integrity is subject to review not only by the applicant's engineers, but also the manufacturer's engineers, and is ultimately finally reviewed by the city engineers as part of that building process. That's the best assurance I can give that the tower will be designed structurally to remain vertical during any foreseeable events, whether they're wind or seismic. Obviously, there are situations that could occur in the future, that are outside the scope of our analysis or design, but based upon current codes, we will meet all current code requirements for the structural integrity of that tower.
Okay. Did that conclude the matters you wanted to touch on, Pat Evans?
Let me just look back through my notes from the other comments that were made. As far as the additional coverage, Rich Conroy would be the appropriate party to analyze any potential additional coverage to the north. We don't have that included in our application, and as Kim said, the purpose of the application was to replicate current coverage, not to increase coverage areas. That's all I'm able to add, Mr. Reeves.
Sure. On behalf of the applicant, I guess the question I had would be, you know, if the school went away or or if it's determined that the tower is going to remain, or sorry, the water tower, if that's possible. I mean, does the applicant have any, issue with things staying as they are? Is there some independent reason that a tower would need to go in apart from the water tower being removed?
I don't have any particular knowledge of that being an alternative at the moment. It was not something that was considered. What was considered was that the current lease that the individual carriers have with the school district had been declared no longer in force and effect. The current carriers are subject to a temporary lease with a 30-day vacation clause, meaning that if the school district were to tell us that we have to be off that water tank, we have 30 days to relocate. Whether or not there are additional plans on the part of the school district to not go forward, none of those variables were included in our analysis. Only the facts that we knew at the time, which was A, the school district had been approved for a master site plan, B, that part of that plan required movement of the existing carriers from the water tank, and B, that there was a very short fuse from the date of notice to the point of complete relocation to a new location. And as previous comments indicated, the process that we've gone through now has, both internally and externally with the city, approaching nearly 3 years to get to this point. So were the school district to go forward quickly, we would still need to be able to relocate, assuming that the site plan stays as it is. We would still need to relocate fairly quickly. And it is not something that, in my 30 years of experience, is something that we can do either quickly or on the back of a matchbook.
Well, and I guess question there then, along the same lines, if the school district, when you talk about the lease, which is now sort of a short-term lease, you're saying month to month, the lease in question is the one allowing continued use of the water tower, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so I guess my question for the applicant would be, if a longer term lease were put in place that, say that the district needed to give X amount, of time to move, if that were the case, would the applicant, still feel like they need to move forward immediately? I guess what I'm trying to think is there a way, is there an alternative solution whereby, were this to be approved, it would be conditioned upon the school, the law, I won't say the school project, but I'll say the loss of the existing use of the tower, water tower.
If I might address that, Mr. Reeves?
Okay, but let the applicant speak to it, and then I'll go to you next, okay?
Yeah, I think that
If you want to defer to Kim Allen, that's fine. I just want to.
I can both answer that, and I think I can defer to Kim for some additional information.
Okay.
That
Why
is
don't we do
not
that?
something that has been part of our discussions with the school district. I think in fairness, both to the applicant and to the school district, that is something we would need to take up separately and come back with a more reasoned approach rather than just shooting from the hip.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I wanted to ask but really my question has more to do with, I'm not saying it is possible. I'm saying if that were possible, would the applicant oppose that, to the extent that the thought being, if nothing ever happens with the school and then the water tower remains, I think the community would much prefer not to have a water tower and a cell tower, when the reason the height variance has been sought for the cell tower is that the water tower is going away. Does that make sense, Pat Evans?
No, that makes perfect sense. But as I say, Mr. Reeves, I am not in a position to answer that in any substantive way without talking to the school district and to the clients.
Understood. Okay, so with that, then, if Kim Allen wants to provide any additional thoughts on that issue.
And I would ask Mr. Evans one follow-up question, which is, has his team had any outreach by the school district regarding the retaining the water tower or renegotiating the lease to have the carrier stay on there?
No, to the best of my knowledge, we've had no communication or outreach from the school district regarding any additional or potential options.
And I guess this is Kim Allen again for the record. I think what I would add, we of course have not, this hasn't come up and we haven't discussed it with the district or with our clients for that matter. But the other concern here is the long arc of permit and construction. Land use permits are given for just a specific period of time, and then you have to build the facility. They're not open-ended by code. And so we are under an obligation to commence construction, and then again, construction, ordering materials. I mean, all of it, is a long process that far exceeds a 1-month notice to vacate the facility. So I think that there are really almost too many variables in the question about if the school district presented a deal that was different. We'd only be able to address that if all of those variables were met. I mean, what would the notice provision be? What would the length of the lease on the water tank be? Certainly, as I think someone testified today, cell tower leases are typically for 25 years. They're long-term leases. So not having those variables answered, I don't know how we would formulate a response to your question, Mr. Reeves.
Okay, well, and I'll certainly have to think things through, but is my understanding about